This is Leilani Coffin, your host from the Learning Council, and we're going to have a great day together today. This is all about a discussion on supporting resiliency in K-12 schools and districts. And I just want to mention, as we get started here, and before I pass over the baton, what's really going on. And I'm just going to give you one data point from our most recent quick survey. These are the little 2-minute surveys we launch out. We had 101 school and district administrators respond to this. The percentage of teachers that are feeling overwhelmed or burnt out right now is at 74%. And the other ones are saying we're doing okay. So this is high, and it has a meaningfulness that sort of is hitting the administrative level really hard. So I want to pass the baton over to John Baker, who's our sponsor today. He's the president and CEO of Desire to Learn, to introduce my good friends Maurice, Connie, and Joanne, and start this heated dialogue about what's going on right now and what are the answers. So excited to have everyone with us today. I'm going to go off camera, so the spotlight's on you, and I'll just lurk for the hour and see what happens with you guys. Thank you so much, all of you, for being with us today. Okay, John.
Thanks, Leilani, and thanks again for the kind introduction and pulling us all together. It's such an important effort that you're doing to help clear the pathway, if you will, with a number of research agenda items and helping to really craft a shared vision for how we build more resiliency into the K-12 system. So thanks for helping to convene us. Well, folks, maybe just a quick introduction on my end, and then I'm going to pass it around to my fellow panelists to give a quick introduction, and I'll cue them up with give us something that we don't know about you in terms of something that would surprise us. But just a quick introduction on my end. So I started D2L in my third year of university to go out there and have a transformational impact on the way the world learns. I was wrestling with one key challenge, which is what's the most important problem that I could solve that would have the biggest impact on the world. And I couldn't think of anything bigger than transforming the way the world learns, because as everyone on this call recognizes, learning has this wonderful ripple effect. It doesn't just impact the student that's in the classroom, it ripples from one family member to the next, from one generation to the next, and throughout our communities. And so, it has this wonderful impact that we don't often celebrate as much as we probably should. And during these challenging times with COVID-19, clearly we've been very busy in terms of supporting all of our clients that have been doing online learning all over the world, working in about 50 different countries, supporting millions and millions of students, and also helping to transition everybody to basically fully online overnight in all these different regions. So not without challenge, but really proud of how our team stepped up and leaned into the storm with our clients and supported better than 4 nines of uptime, and just making sure that technology was one thing that they did not have to worry about during this pandemic, if you will. So that's a quick intro about D2L in terms of providing our learning technology. But I really want to get into this topic because, for me, I'm particularly passionate about this. Not just because this is D2L as a business, but I also sit on an industry strategy council thinking about, well, how do we rebuild the economy post-pandemic? So, we're advising government on how to bend the economic curve back up in the right direction. And I keep reminding them that there's this learning curve that's been impacted, that there's been a lot of learning loss during this pandemic, a lot of challenges. And it's not easy. And I think, Leilani, your statistic at the start really underscores this, which is teachers weren't, prepared for a pandemic, clearly. There's a lot more that we can do to help support. And today we're going to dive into these challenges and try, I hope, to build a shared vision for what a future could look like, because it's hard to do anything other than just, emergency response mode during this. And now we've got 3 leaders on here that are doing far more than just simply emergency response mode. But I think as we look forward, when we think about resilience, we want to think about how do we not just bounce back, but how do we actually bounce forward and build a better education system that's going to support, a better response to future challenges or future opportunities, and hopefully come back stronger than when we entered this pandemic. And I know that's a huge challenge to map that all out in less than an hour, but we're going to do our best. to cut through some of this and really have a good conversation here. So now I'm going to turn it over to my panelists to make a quick introduction and tell us a little about you, the district, and something that would surprise us. So maybe Connie, we'll start with you first.
Surprising. Okay, well, I am Connie Colosi, and I'm here in Pinellas County, Florida, and we are in the Tampa Bay area. I'm not a football fan, but right now everyone in Tampa Bay is a football fan, right? Because not only is our team playing, but we're playing here in Tampa Bay. So we're excited about that. So surprising, I'm not a football fan. But I will say that the thing that's surprising to me and to anybody that knows my career is that I would be on the front line of this digital learning quest because that has not been my primary focus and concern throughout my career. I'm very much a practitioner. I just want to know which button to push to make it work. Really, if I had to say what my career specialty is, it is in teacher development and helping teachers feel self-efficacy in their job to build their resilience because they're going to build that into their kids. So I feel like even more so than the technology, this piece of how do we help our teachers get through this is where my passion is.
Oh, thanks, Connie. And you're becoming a football fan overnight, I can imagine as well. So, Joanne, we'll go to you next.
My name is Joanne Glenn, and I am the principal leading Pasco County's virtual school program. Here in Florida, every school district by law has to operate a virtual school program serving students in kindergarten through 12th grade, and both full-time and part-time enrollment. So that has positioned me alongside our curriculum department to support the work of our district during this challenging chapter. Something that's surprising about me that not a lot of people would know is that I'm a military brat, and I actually started school in Japan. And I'm grateful for that experience because I think it challenged me to learn to meet lots of people and to appreciate the positives about changing situations. And I'm proud of my family's service and look forward to continuing to share some of those stories with students and staff.
Well, thanks for sharing that. I'm looking forward to hearing some stories from Japan at some point or another. We actually do a lot of work there, and so Maurice, over to you.
Certainly. My name is Maurice Dragon. I am Senior Director of Digital Learning in Orange County Public Schools in Orlando, Florida. So we're the 8th largest, I think now, school district in the nation. And my responsibility and my team, what we do is we help to support the platforms and the resources that teachers and students use for learning. And so that responsibility took on a new perspective and new weight with the pandemic. And we've done a lot to just really work to make sure that things are effectively going well for teachers and students in the classroom. I guess if anything might be an interesting fact about me, before I was in a district-related role, I spent 8.5 years in the classroom as a first grade teacher. I'm also 6'6", and I mentioned that as a fact because when you're 6'6" teaching first graders, no one realizes they're first graders. They all thought they were kindergartners because they look so short compared to me.
Oh, that's great, Maurice. Both my parents were educators. So was my grandfather, and so my mom actually taught grades 1 through 3. So she was not 6'6". But I think that context is very helpful in terms of just giving us a little bit of background in terms of the roles that you're in. But it would be good to start building out a little bit more of that context in terms of how the districts have navigated these challenging times. So, were you ready? What have been some of the key challenges? What have, if there's been some key lessons learned? It'd be great to share some of those insights with the broader group. And, I keep anchoring off of the word resilience as part of this topic here today. And if you look at the etymology, the old Latin root of resilience, it's recoil or rebound. And I think we can do more than that. I think it's not just about rebounding to where we were. It's about how do we bounce forward. And so, but we're going to paint that picture of the future. But before we do, let's go back and give a little bit more context in terms of how you've navigated the challenges so far. So maybe Connie, we can start with you again and just tell us a little bit about were you ready? Were there some surprises? And what have been some key lessons that you've learned? Oh, and famous words for 2020 you've carried over. You're on mute.
There you go. Sorry. So were we ready? I think we were more ready than we might have imagined. We had laid a lot of infrastructure and things in place that gave us an opportunity to build off those things and move forward. Were there some surprises? Oh, yes. And a lot of that was in, I would say, within our workforce being able to really be independent and function in a digital world. And then from there, their assumptions about their students. And we think that our students are digital natives, so to speak. And they know how, our students know how to do what they know how to do, but they don't know how to do the stuff they need for academic purposes. And so those were kind of our big surprises. And we did move into a couple of platforms that we had not deployed district-wide prior to that. Notably, we had not adopted a full LMS, and when we jumped in March, we capitalized on what we had through Microsoft with Teams. We realized we needed more structure than that if we were going to continue into this adventure, and so we did purchase an LMS, and we also for the first time got even a little bit of interest in going one-to-one, and we are now fast moving toward implementing one-to-one here. This year, grades 4 through 9, next year 3 through 10, and building from there. So a lot has changed. A lot is not going back ever. And then how do we capitalize off of all we've learned is the challenge.
Oh, thanks for sharing, Connie. That's helpful to get that context. Joanne, over to you.
I would echo many of the points that Dr. Colosi made. I think that Florida districts in many ways had some advantages because we have had virtual school programs in place for more than 10 years prior to COVID. However, each district leveraged some of the building blocks and tools and expertise that they had in different ways. So here in Pasco, much like Dr. Colosi, we took stock of the systems that we had already launched throughout the school district. The curriculum, we had a number of blended learning initiatives and a pretty large and solid virtual school program in place. And so combining those two pieces together let us scale up pretty quickly and allowed us to not have to consider deploying new tools on a large scale. We also really leaned into training our staff in those platforms. And so we had the same learning management system in place for 8 years. And the adoption in pre-COVID times was pretty sporadic. You would see a big, jump at the start of the school year because we housed a lot of resources for schools there. And then you had pockets where there were blended learning and kind of power users of the content and the learning management system. What we were able to do is scale that up and really lean on that for Q4 of last school year. And what was interesting is we chose to structure our pandemic response in the form of MOOCs. So we weren't sure what the impact of COVID would be on our staffing and on our structures. We knew there really wouldn't be substitutes and things like that. So we chose a pretty non-traditional way to cover Q4. And that actually, in a strange way, created a professional learning community sort of response. And there was a lot of collaboration via social media groups that we created and supported through our district. And then we got to the summer, and interestingly enough, we were able to get much more interest in additional training to broaden the skill set in the learning management system. And we had teachers who were pretty adamant that, thank you so much for the content that you gave us, but really we'd like to develop our own courses for the fall. And so we got a much higher participation rate in advanced levels of training. And having just completed some review of the usage statistics for those same systems, we have not seen the usage dip post the reopening of schools. Like in Florida, all of our schools had to open for 5 days a week on-campus instruction. We were also allowed to offer some hybrid options. And as I mentioned, we all have virtual school programs, but the consistent use of our learning management system and curriculum tools has actually continued throughout the fall term. And so I, like Dr. Colosi, I don't see us going back. I think that we have really had like 20 years worth of intense professional development and implementation in the last year. And I think that this becomes a part of our new way of work.
Joanne, thank you. Maurice.
So for us in Orange County, we had two things that really helped us at the beginning of the pandemic. We were in the final 2 years of our one-to-one rollout that we call Launch Ed. And so that was helpful to us because we had an established base of students that already had a device, and we just had to figure out how to get the last group of schools devices. The second thing that helped us is that many of the platforms that we use as part of our response to the pandemic were platforms that we already had in place that all students and teachers, regardless of if they were one-to-one or not, had access to throughout our one-to-one program rollout. And so really for us, it was about scaling up instead of purchasing new resources and devices. We emphasize training a lot. We have about 25,000 staff members overall. About 15,000 of those are instructional. And in the first week after we shut down, we had about 10,000 participants in our trainings that we held to help folks just brush up on using some of the systems that we have. We saw massive jumps in the use of those systems. I think as everyone else here said, we had a jump, for example, in our learning management system from 90,000 assignments being turned in a day to over 350,000 assignments being turned in per day. Once we got into the fall, we, just like everyone else, had to open. We offered our innovative program, Launch Ed at Home, which allowed components of the Launch Ed program, such as the digital device, to be used at home by students. We had over 60% of students choose that model of our 180,000 plus students. And so just really supporting video conferencing and supporting that change in how classroom instruction would take place led us to, one, implement a training and support cycle that was really weekly based instead of just saying we're doing a training on these specific programs, to make sure we were targeting what teachers needed. And then not only that, social media became a really big aspect of our support, because you now have thousands of parents who are taking a much deeper and active participation in the education of their students than they have in the past, even if it's just that they're in the home and seeing and hearing things that they may need to understand more about the systems and resources we have. So those have been some of the big new things that have come forward. And we've just seen some really innovative practices. We have everything from the total face-to-face classroom to the total online classroom to everything in between. And the way that our teachers have been able to manage each of those different blended and hybrid instructional spaces has just been amazing.
Well, I think it sounds like the three of you were we're better prepared than most going into this pandemic in terms of being able to respond rapidly to the changes. It's probably not been all perfect, and there's probably been lots of challenges along the way, and we'll probably hear a few of those stories as well here as we go along. But I think there's a few key words there that I underscored, around professional development and helping support the teachers adapt to the new pedagogy, the new way of teaching and learning in these types of environments. There was, technology supports, right, which are critical. Reaching out to every student is another thing that I took away from that. And there's a number of other great lessons there, and we'll share some of the notes post. Before I jump to the next question, I just want to also encourage the attendees that are in the session here that if they have a question, they can go through the Q&A process or right into the chat. Feel free to chime in with your own questions. Don't worry, I've got a lot. But if you do have your own, please do. I encourage you to ask. So I want to get to the theme here, which we wanted to dive into around schools being more resilient. And I provided a little bit of my definition on resilience, but I'd really like to hear yours in terms of what you think about in terms of building a more resilient school system. What needs to be done? What are some of the values we should hold dear as we do this? What are some of the attributes about building a resilient system? Just a few thoughts on that, if you will. Maybe Dr. Colosi, we will go to you first, and then we'll do a similar round on the panel.
All right. So I think one of the biggest stressors here is in caring for our instructional staff and Army, and there's been a lot of stress on them personally, and it's always, I think one of my mantras is that teaching is a very emotional job anyway, and even when all things are going well. And so the need to treat people, understand where they're coming from and build them up from there. I think dealing with their, obviously around COVID and the pandemic, there's just so much fear that we live through, especially in the early days, but ongoing. So, helping people, understanding the need to bring them along, and, we have a job to do, and then trying to really address those things that, what's the major flashpoint here? What's a big rock that we could tackle and help them with? And I think candid communication is one thing that we have really strived for, to tell them where we are, what we're thinking, and what we're doing. Now, it's not been 100% because the level of fear is so high, but and we've, of course, like every district, we've had people retire because of it. We have vacancies because of it. We've gone so far, and I think this is actually a really cool thing. Here in our district office, everyone who's certified is gone on a spreadsheet, and you have a day that you might get a call at 7 o'clock the prior evening and told which school you're going to report to. And you're going to go in the classroom, and you're going to be a substitute teacher. And I think, in terms of living the real life and keeping the district office in touch with what reality is, I think it's actually a pretty good plan.
Well, that is leading from the front lines by definition. So a great example of leading by example there. So, Connie, that's very brave as well. And I do think the social, emotional, mental health, those are probably topics we could dive a little bit deeper into. I agree. Joanne, over to you.
So let me add one more thought to that. So I've had my assignment, and they sent me to a magnet school to teach 6th grade language arts. Well, I'm a middle school person, so it was a softball. And when I got there, it's a K-8 school. And they said, oh, gee, it turns out our opening is 1st grade.
So Maurice, you probably had some lessons ready to share right away, right? Well, okay. Joanne, over to you.
I agree that communication, I think, is probably the biggest thing that helped sustain our team throughout the uncertainty. We had actually begun working on our plan a few weeks before our spring break, and were very transparent in holding Zoom meetings with school leaders and with our teachers. And then throughout the spring break process, we were pushing out video interviews with different leadership people through our social media channels. So there were interviews with like our director for exceptional student education, and interviews with me, with our curriculum leaders, and answering parent questions, staff questions, and so on. And I think that it created actually a really helpful loop of being able to keep tabs on where the pain points were, and allowed us to be pretty nimble in responding. It also helped to be honest about the level of uncertainty we had. We all know that this was very much uncharted territory, and that there wasn't a playbook anywhere for this scenario. And I think rather than trying to suggest that there was, people were patient and appreciated the fact that we were trying very hard to take things off of people's plates, and then created channels for them to ask questions or tell us, you know, that was a fine first idea, but this is not something that we need to continue. And that process continued throughout the summer as we planned for our reopening. And I hope that is a piece that we continue to sustain as well, because even when we get back to something that is much more normal, I think that people are going to insist on having that feedback and the ability to get answers and information or offer feedback, whether it's brutal or not, and expect to see us incorporate that and adjust. So I'm pretty excited about that, even though it was pretty grueling. And I think that helped people trust us while we built those processes out.
Joanne, so while my parents are educators, I attended engineering. As you can tell, I went into software. But as an engineer, you learn very quickly about feedback loops. And the stronger the feedback loops, including even getting to predictive models around feedback loops, the stronger the system. So I'd encourage, that's a really good principle to have in terms of building more resilience into any system, including ones that you use or design as an engineer. So really good. Maurice, over to you.
So first, I didn't want to interrupt, but Connie, boy, that I feel for you. That is a big change to go from middle to first grade for sure. But that being said, I'll approach this from a little bit of a different angle, just based upon what my team covers. And I think what we really focused on is some resiliency in the systems that we use to support teaching and learning. And so we saw some major shifts in the way that those systems were used. I mentioned the jump before in the number of assignments that were being turned into our learning management system. We saw a jump from about maybe 15 to 20 video conferencing taking place per day to almost 8,000 or more video conferencing taking place per day. And we even saw a shift in April from folks normally logging in a staggered, sequence, high school around 7:15, elementary around 8:30, middle a little bit later, to almost everyone logging in at the same time. So we really had to make sure that we were building hardiness and redundancy in the systems that we use to support learning, to make sure that it could handle the new amount of activity that would be on there. We wanted to have the Launch It at Home model be a model that would provide bell-to-bell learning for students. But if you have a system that's not up, then you're not providing bell-to-bell instruction for students. And so we had to have something that would provide that for 60% of our population when school started. So we had to have resiliency there. The second piece would be inside of our training model. I mentioned earlier that our training model really had to change, where instead of these large scale pieces that we just looked at and said that these are the focus points for us this year, it really became a week by week focus on where are teachers now? Where are they in the systems and the pieces that we support? Are they more in the, I need to understand this? Or are they now in their specific features, such as breakout rooms, that I need to have a much better understanding of? And then finally, in that communication part, that feedback loop, I don't think I have anything really big to add there, because I think everyone has said it so well as to how important that really, really became. And so I think from each of those pieces, what we really started building up as an institution is this understanding and this ability to just track wherever we needed to, based upon the needs of teachers and of students at the time they needed it. And we weren't just as a monolith saying that this is what teaching is going to look like, this is what learning is going to look like, but we had to be able to provide support for everything in between that face-to-face and online environment.
Well, thanks for sharing that, Maurice. Scalability of these systems really matters, especially during these challenging times. I know we work with a very large school district in Georgia called Gwinnett County. And there, we spent the last number of years preparing for, in their case, they were worried about Snowmageddon. And so just making sure that they're ready for snow days to go fully virtual, and, being able to shift to have a couple 100,000 students all log in all at the same time at 7:30 in the morning mattered. And in other cases, we've got another client that has about 1.5 million students that log in at 8 a.m. in the morning. So, these are not easy things to tackle from a technology perspective. And I would imagine behind the scenes, your team's been working very hard to ensure the enrollments are going well and mapping the right students to the right teachers, and you name it. So I don't think, people recognize how much heroics have been going on behind the scenes in many of these different school districts to continue to make sure that, the students, and I would imagine the teachers, are also really well supported during these efforts. So I applaud you. I just looked up our uptime for year to date, and it was 99.9993. So 5 nines and a 3, Maurice. So, we've learned over the years that we actually do something that's very different than most. We actually run hot, active sites. So even if one zone in AWS goes down, we're up and running still elsewhere, which makes it easier to run almost like an electrical grid versus in terms of uptime versus having issues. So not that I'm going way down a technical track here. I'm going to pull us back up again. But I don't know if Maurice, did you want to comment on that, or?
No, I think even what you said there about that diversification of just what your backend looks like, as you said, starting to use some of these other services where if something goes down, you can have something else to hop in and still provide that support. We had to do that diversification also because, as you said, the uptime, anytime down is the time where a student is not learning or a teacher is not able to teach. So it became critical.
Well, yeah, and I think we as technology vendors also need to do a lot more here too. We spent pretty much the whole year trying to integrate with every SIS that existed, so that this could be an out of the box experience versus a big workload. And I couldn't believe how hard that was. It really shouldn't be this hard, and we really do need to do a better job as an industry, truly embracing open standards and open flows of data. So maybe that'll be another webinar. We'll do a technical track one because I would have a lot of fun just diving into the details there. So bringing it up another level in terms of quality, equity, social justice issues, things like that you're seeing in terms of resilience. I don't know if have these presented challenges? Has this pandemic sort of put a light on some cracks in the system? I don't know if we want to talk about that. Are there things in there that we want to address as we think about building a more resilient system going forward? Maurice, we'll reverse the order. We'll go to Maurice first, and then we'll go to Joanne, and then to Dr. Colosi.
Certainly, and I think, again, just taking it from the area that I work with, one of the things that we saw, for example, is that there were some students that just did not have stable internet at home. And so if you're going to have a model that requires students to have internet access to take part, you really now have to make sure that you have options that are there for those students. As a district, we handed out over 10,000 hotspots to students to help to make sure that those students would be able to have internet access. We tried to work with the vendors that we had for example, video conferencing, to try to reduce the amount of bandwidth that a video conferencing session would take overall. So that if you had a student at home and there were multiple students who were using the internet one time and they had just a basic internet connection, to lessen the bandwidth hit on that home overall. And so we really had to make sure that we were making those kinds of changes to try to support students being able to stay on. Another thing that we did is the social emotional part is really important, especially when you have students who are younger, and all students really, that they are now going into a new school year where for the first time they are not able to actually meet their teacher, or they're not able to act face-to-face or meet the other students in the classroom. How do you make that connection? And so we worked really hard to activate, for example, some of the systems that we use actually started building in social emotional aspects into the systems themselves, like badges that you could give each other, or stickers that were like thank yous that could be given. And we really tried to encourage teachers to use those so that you could still have a way to make a personal connection with either another peer or with a student from some of the things that were inside the system. So I think those equities definitely started coming through. We did our best to try to make sure we were managing the access and the support that was there. But I think just like everyone else, there's still a ways to go.
I think it's pretty amazing what you actually managed to accomplish during this time to try to close some of those divides. And I hear you on the social emotional badges. We saw a spike last month of about 1 million badges being issued to students. So I think teachers have finally figured out how to leverage these types of technologies to provide a little bit of a boost or a little bit of support. So it's a really good example. Joanne.
I'm just over here writing down notes about badges, so I want to follow up on that.
They're amazing, Joanne. Badges are great.
I've used them for PD, but it never crossed my mind during this chapter to leverage those. I think that's very smart. For us, I would say that the a challenge that we had to work hard to overcome was quite simply just like tier 1 user support. And it was really, I couldn't be prouder of our team in Pasco, because it really was all hands on deck, and has continued to be all hands on deck. We stood up call centers and provided just a wealth of video tutorials and created ways for teachers and other users to share some of those resources. But to circle back to something that Dr. Colosi mentioned, we really became very aware of how little the skill set was for our learners in terms of just the basics of the tech needed to learn this way. And it has challenged our thinking about how we leverage some of our career and technical education efforts and resources to help close that gap. It really shone a spotlight there and made us rethink, I think, some of the tech support that we offer. Internally, our information systems department is used to supporting teachers and administrators and the business of running a school district. But in this circumstance, we had to just get on the phone and walk families through the basics of signing on, and had to learn to troubleshoot devices that we didn't issue because we needed people to be using their own devices. So that it was great to see just folks from other departments who were willing to take shifts and help take those calls. And I feel like our team walked away with a deeper appreciation of the role that we all play in normal circumstances and some of the hidden skill sets. You know, folks who work in our employee relations department were answering phones and walking families through how to use our single sign-on system and access district email for their student and things like that. And overall, I think that we grew closer through that experience, and it really could have easily gone the other way. So that has helped us plan differently for this school year. And again, I do think that's going to continue on. You know, we'll always now in the back of our minds think, if that happened again, how ready are we? Because it was unthinkable before, and now it's really not the craziest thing that could happen. And so knowing that we have very specific steps that we can take to make this a part of our kids' everyday learning experience, I think has helped us make sure that we're really delivering on that mission of preparing our kids for what comes next after their journey through our school system, and hopefully positions them well to be successful.
I think that's the ultimate goal, isn't it? Is to prepare the kids for what comes next. And yes, I empathize with you in terms of the support side. We do end user support for a lot of our clients, and we definitely saw a spike up. But what was great was how collaborative clients were in terms of trying to drive down the reasons why students would call in the first place. And, that type of collaboration is really, really important. And maybe Connie, you maybe as you're answering, we also saw a huge increase in, we have a whole instructional design team, so as an example, we built out a K-5 content for Florida not that long ago for a client in that region, just building out all the online courses, very timely. To deploy those out. But we certainly saw us spinning up even bigger teams during this pandemic to work with clients to sort of map out sort of a content strategy to this challenge as well too. I don't know if you want to speak to that or other topics, but over to you, Connie.
Well, as I was listening to Joanne talk, one of the things that we were able to capitalize on is we've had very stable leadership in our district, our upper management. But every big district in Florida here, we have huge districts. Every district has a problem historically, I think, with people working in silos. They do their thing, and they do their thing in their own little sphere. And I think one of the things that has allowed us to make it this far, so to speak, is the coherence that developed among the district leadership, and then among the messages and the messaging that went to our school leaders. And then, of course, that support just goes right down the line. So we did, one of the things that we're really wanting to do better at and grow is our ability to support, as Joanne said, our whole support has been in supporting teachers with technology, but we haven't had any infrastructure for supporting students and families with technology apart from the schools. And Orange, I know, is ahead of us in this, and I've taken notes on some comments that Maurice has made in the past that I plan to put into gear. But still, it's that schoolhouse. The district can do so much, but when we have 126 schools, which is laughably small to Maurice, but the people that are working with the families have to be empowered to be able to do this. And, when they walk into the schools, the secretary, the first thing can't be that they call the district help desk. Someone there has to be able to have the confidence and the wherewithal to do some troubleshooting and to serve the family. So we're going to definitely be building out our systems to better support families, especially going into this one-to-one, which is new for us.
I think it's a really good point. I remember when I was doing an epistemology of systems thinking class, like a PhD level class at my university, I actually chose the education system to do a quick study on. And I was shocked when I read all the literature on like it's student, then parent, then teacher. It didn't dawn on me the role of the parent is so important in the lives of these students until I did that work. And I think quite often most people don't realize that. And this pandemic certainly highlighted the importance of parents and that engagement with their kids. So your efforts, I think, are going to go a long way. And by the way, us having these conversations and sparking ideas amongst each other, that's exactly why we try to convene these types of webinars. I think together we can craft the shared vision, which is what I want to pivot into. Because I haven't seen any questions from the attendees, so I'm going to challenge them once more to queue up some good questions for us. But I want to pivot into building a vision for the future. So how do we build a better education system? We think about this a lot from a technology perspective. But one thing that stood out to me recently is I spent a lot of time thinking, well, we're not doing this because of technology. It's not about digitizing the classroom, then optimizing the experience, and then just leveraging technology for technology's sake. At the end of the day, it's really about making the education system more human, to try to engage students, to engage parents, to engage teachers, help them get more one-on-one time, help them get back to the old definition of study where they could go off and explore all kinds of great ideas while yet still picking up all of these skills that we need them to have to be ready for that future. But it's a journey, right? So, many of us are just grappling with just simply the digitization to support either the classroom experience or the fully online or some hybrid in between. We haven't even grappled with the optimization. Some of you have on this call. But we can also get to that next stage, which is truly transforming the learning experience. So doing things differently than what we do today. And that's what could potentially open up all kinds of different possibilities. It's one of the great promises of technology. But I think we're not quite there yet. And so, as we talk about this future, be bold. Don't think about it as just, that first step of just digitizing. Let's think about how we take those next steps around optimizing the experience and truly transforming it. Because I think it's only through creating this shared dialogue which will allow us all to move forward. Joanne, you coming from Japan, there's a Japanese proverb, if I'm not mistaken, and maybe I'm mistaken on this. The nail that sticks out gets hammered. So I don't think we want to have a vision here which just one of us. I think the more that we can create a shared vision or shared narrative for that future, the easier it is for all of us to pursue it with more vigor, more speed. So let's talk about it. So what does that future hold? What do we need to do differently, whether it's on digital learning hubs or professional development, flexibility? It's a wide open. Does someone else want to chime in there? Go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to chime in and then prime the pump on this future stuff for you.
Sure.
Just give you this little. So the number one issue nationally, there's two of them. Motivation of kids because they're missing online, they're not coming back, blah, blah, blah. That's number one. Okay, so everyone's already talked about that one. Number two is logistics. So I want to just point out, yesterday we were on the line with a bunch of people from the districts in Wyoming, Idaho, and Montana. Interesting. And when we do talk as Learning Council to some of the teacher level, it becomes really apparent to me as a person that's a professional sort of systems thinker like you, John, and the logistics person, and realizing that the number one special report that we've ever launched as Learning Council was our one on systems leadership versus the classroom. Interesting title. Number one, everyone downloads that one, even more than our EduJedi dictionary, is that logistics is the future. So let me just point out that as you're thinking about the future, the logistics of what is the teacher's job has an enormous amount of resistance in it to release power, to let technology do some of the heavy lift. And what's happening is that all of the traffic back and forth between the teacher and the student, the distribution of the things, the receiving of them back, assignments, blah, 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 the ongoing communication, the creation of the things that go in the things, the selection of the things that go in the things, it all centers around this human that basically allows the system to maintain a structure, a bureaucratic structure that distributes down through people. And I'm questioning that. I'm questioning the overwhelm of the teachers and what percentage of load can go back to an automation, auto cohorting, auto distribution, Uberization, like auto calendaring. And that's really where my thoughts are going in terms of what leadership looks like. You know this, John, because you're in.
Well, Leilani, I think you're hitting it right on, which is sort of that next step, which is it's not just digitization, it's the optimization once you get there.
Yeah, but I freaked out to people yesterday in Idaho and Montana and kind of love them, but like as soon as you even hint at the idea that the teacher is not the sole source of everything.
Yeah.
It's a freak out moment. And I think we're going to have to sort of give that up a little bit because Connie, you're already talking about the fact that you're getting sent out like a SWAT team. We're in that moment now where we're moving into a network modality. And I think inspection needs to go a little deeper into our structure. So I'll leave it there and over to you guys. Scaring yet? Are you scared too, Connie, because this is like heresy.
Maurice, you're off mute first.
Talking about technology doing some of the work.
Yeah, Maurice, you're off mute first. We'll go to you first.
So I think I'll jump on with 2 points. One is that, when we go out of education and we think about where we've seen massive changes take place in just society overall, I think about the fact like when the smartphone debuted and then everyone got a smartphone. And then all of a sudden, once everyone had a smartphone, you had all these new businesses like Uber that was mentioned and some of these other businesses that just didn't exist before. And so I think there is an analogous thing that will potentially happen in education also, where there will be these new educational settings and educational opportunities that we just were not able to provide before once we move beyond the kind of digitization that we're seeing right now. Because I think the pivot that we are seeing is folks who are still looking and they're saying that our core job is to make sure that students are learning, they're learning on grade level material, and we need to make sure that we're targeting and helping them as much as possible. We have a vast amount of data now that we did not have before, and about our students and how they're learning and what they're learning. We don't really have systems to help us take advantage of that data. For example, if you have kids that are struggling with Algebra 1 or kids that are struggling with math overall, we now have more data at an individual school site. But because we're using much more centralized systems now, we have more data as a central office overall. And I think the ability to maybe use that to be proactive in the way that we're providing support and in the way that we're providing resources based on that data is somewhere is a pathway that's going to be, I think, really important. The other piece that I think about, though, is this is going to go way back, but I also think about the commercial that Apple made for the second generation of the iPad. And I love that commercial because it talks about the fact that it says technology alone is not enough, but it's technology mixed with the humanities, mixed with all the things that we do as people that really makes things important. And so I support this piece around the technology really in the background, doing some things that at scale teachers can't do and that people can't do, as far as maybe giving students some additional practice or some additional target or surfacing that to the teacher themselves. But I also want teachers, I think the challenge is going to be there to make sure that as that's happening, teachers understand that the goal is not for the technology to take over their job, and that anyone who is supporting that deeply understands that it is the technology mixed with the skill of the teacher that is truly going to make the difference and is going to be the future of the classroom. And what they do is an integral part of making it all work. So I think those opportunities to really scale and use data are going to be really big and huge. And using large scale data to personalize instruction and give the teacher even more autonomy to create some personal connections and give personal support is a direction that we're heading in.
I'm a big fan of that language. And I think it's a missed opportunity not to put that potential in the hands of teachers. We actually have a published paper on that around learning analytics, and what we discovered was that the more that a teacher just looks at the data, the results improve for students. So it's interesting. Yeah, I think we've got a really interesting future as we start to move up that pathway from just simply looking at it to just digitizing to getting to those next steps. Joanne, or would you like to go next?
Sure. I would just like to say that I think Maurice has it exactly right. I think that now we have a little bit more receptiveness within the system, within our communities, to some of the positives that technology can bring. I also think that our experience here during COVID has alleviated the most common concern that I heard from folks when we launched our virtual instruction programs in 2009, 2010, and that was that the teacher was going to be sort of shoved off to the side, that it was independent learning and that the teacher's role would be minimized. And I think that that didn't happen. I think that people really began to appreciate the types of interactions, the focused nature and personalized nature of the interactions that we were able to provide and continue. But I do also think that we are challenging ourselves to think differently about what learning means and switch to more of a mastery type of model. I think that some choice, I saw a comment from Liz in the chat box about increasing the student voice and choice in there. And in our minds, it's more about like the learning outcome or the expected level of performance is the bar, and the time that it takes for an individual student to reach that level is the variable. So technology can be a great resource in helping us to really walk the walk of differentiating instruction and offering mastery paths for kids. But if we don't do it well and do it intentionally, we're also going to turn people off very quickly.
Joanne, I agree with you. I just penned a blog post on mastery-based learning just before the holidays. I would encourage taking a quick look at it. We spent 18 years trying to build out our next gen model on that, where we can see the learning curve and actually assess people. I think it's going to be a game changer. It'll turn traditional gradebooks into a bit of a relic, where we can actually truly assess how students are doing. And it wouldn't have been possible with it technology because it's just too much work. Is that Dr. Liz? Is that Dr. Liz Glowa that I know from Maryland on the call here? Because if so, if it's someone else, then great too. But I remember you very well from Maryland. If it's the same Liz,
hi John, it is.
All right, you got to weigh in with a comment there. Now that I know it's you that's on the call.
Okay. So the comment that I put into chat, and it's already been mentioned, is that student voice is absolutely critical in the learning partnership. So you've got the teacher, you have the technology, and you have the student voice. And in the systems that I've been looking at, that way of involving the student voice is still not well developed, and allowing students to have access to actionable data so that their voice is informed.
Oh, I think you're onto a critical piece there, and even constructing their own learning, not just consuming it. Yeah, I think, Liz, that's a great point. And great to reconnect. I would love to chat with you at some point. Connie, over to you for last point on this, and then I'll try to wrap as best as I can.
I was going to kind of go where Liz was talking about. It does, the challenge and the exciting thing for the future is the ability to leverage this technology for more individualized learning. And the teacher no longer has to be the expert in everything. And I've heard Leilani talk about this. I can't use all her terminology, but the idea that we can begin to specialize and let on groups of people take the thing that they're good at. And so, for instance, creating lessons by master teachers, someone still has to sit there with the child and look in their eyes and be a part of the conversation and that personal touch. So using the technology to leverage areas, the ability for students to research, but to create, to innovate, and have personal voice and choice in their learning.
Well, folks, it feels like we're wrapping early here. I think we were just getting warmed up on probably the most important topic. I should have gotten to this one earlier. Next time we will. I do want to carry on this conversation. I think we're just starting to paint a really good picture for what that future of teaching and learning looks like. And the language that was used by Maurice, Joanne, Connie, and Liz are all truly part of that future. And I think the more that we can all work together to race to that, it's going to paint a brighter future for a lot of students. So thank you all for your contributions and to helping us to advance this dialogue today, and look forward to chatting with you again soon.
Yes, yes. And thank you all from the Learning Council. Connie, I think your comment about the interweaving of the true human leadership is critical. That's what we're looking at too as Learning Council, is the true logistics of the humanity of technology, but how technology could be doing more. How exactly is this weave going to work? So I think we need more of this, more conversation about this, more divulging also from learning research, what's actually happening. So John, thank you for leading this conversation. Maurice, my friend, thank you. And Connie and Joanne, good to see you guys again so much. And good job. Keep doing it. All right. I think that's us over and out for now. Thanks for being with us for this last hour. See you next time.